Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello, dear listener. Thank you once again for tuning in to Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, the literary podcast. We hope you tell your friends about it. If you like it, of course, tell your friends. If you don't like it, give us a call. Drop us a line. It's Talking Books and Stuff, our podcast. You know where it is because you've found it right here. You can also track us down online. And it is Dennis at talkingbooks.tk for an email. A special presentation here right now. What we have done back in October of 2022, we went to an event in Radisson, Saskatchewan, and recorded a presentation by local author Dee Hobsbawn-Smith. Dee Hobsbawn-Smith, that's her name. The book is Danceland Diary. Tells us, she says, took her 9 years to write. You'll find out why when you read it. The story unfolds against a backdrop of the drug-fueled downtown east side of Vancouver and the horrific pig farm murders, the seductive beauty of rural Saskatchewan, and the glittering lights of a famous prairie dance hall. You'll find all of that and much more in Danceland Diary. It's by Dee Hobsbawn-Smith. She'll tell you all about it. It's from Radiant Press. I'm your genial host, DR, the book guy, so let's take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. We're neighbors, and it's for me, it's a real treat to be able to read to neighbors, because Dave and I live on the remnants of my family farm, and we don't, we're both writers, so we keep to ourselves because writing takes a lot of time. So if you don't see me in the Langham Credit Union too often, it's because I'm at home writing. And if you don't see me at too many, local events other than the farmers market in Borden and the farmers market in Radisson, it's because I'm at home writing. And if you see me walking the dog, it's because I'm thinking about writing. So it is a really, as I said, time-intensive kind of thing to do. And by way of example, this novel, I started it in 2012 as my creative thesis when I was doing my MFA in writing at the University of Saskatchewan. 2012, right? That was a long time ago. So before I go much further, though, I need to say thank you to a few other people. So thank you all of you for setting aside your evening. And thank you also to my hosts, Shirley and Tina and the Radisson Library, and Colin from Lakeland Library, who had a hand in my coming as well. I'm hoping he'll be here. He's lots of fun. I'd also like to thank my publisher, Radiant Press, Deborah Kennedy and John, did it wrong. I hate it when I mix up names. John Kennedy and Deborah Bell. They swapped their names back and forth between them. And also the designer Tanya Holk, who took advantage of what I suggested, namely this beautiful piece of art by David Thauberger. When I saw it, I thought, oh, that's going to be the cover. And here it is, it's the cover. So I really owe David a big thank for that as well. I'd also like to thank my husband, Dave Margocius. He's my first reader, my first editor, and my best friend. And he also has taken a large role on in doing a lot of media and PR for me, because having a book out is a big and busy deal, and so he's been doing a lot of that. You made it. Hi. Come on in. I'd also like to acknowledge Lorna Crozier, the poet Lorna Crozier, for allowing me to use some of the words of her late husband, the poet Patrick Lane. Some of his words serve as the epigraph to this book. So when you crack it open, the first words you actually read are from the wonderful poet and novelist Pat Lane. Much missed. I'd like to thank the good folks at Sask Arts for funding, and especially the good folks at the Saskatchewan Writers Guild for funding as well. And Guy Vanderhaeg, yes, best novelist in Canada, don't you think? Say yes. Yes. Give me an amen. Yes, absolutely. Amen. Fabulous novelist. His latest, I think, is his best. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. August into Winter. I learned about motivation in his creative writing class at the U of S while I was earning my MFA, and it was worth every sweaty hour that I spent working on short stories, because motivation is what moves, especially novels, moves them forward. So I'm immensely grateful to God and you. So, this book, as I told you, had its beginnings in 2012. But before that, it had its beginnings in stories told by my mama here and her sister, my Auntie Lila. Dave and I live on the remnants of the family farm where my mother and my aunt were raised, south of Langham, west of Saskatoon, right between Highway 16 and Highway 14. So really, just down the road. And my mom and my aunt always told stories about their grandfather, my great-grandfather, who disappeared and threw his wife and their children's lives into complete and utter turmoil. He disappeared. And my mom and my aunt would say over and over again, well, maybe someone put him down a well. And then my mother, who is the world's most practical person, would always say, but who would ruin a perfectly good well? Yeah. Right? Especially here in the dry land. So that was the genesis. I carried that idea around with me for a long time before I figured out what the story was going to be. But that was sort of the linchpin that started one of the timelines in this novel. There are several that you will encounter. The protagonist is named Luca, and it's set, in 2010, she's 30 years old. She has returned to Saskatchewan with her young son. She's a single mother. So people frequently say, well, it's a novel, Dee, but, how much of it is true, honey? So Luca and I have a few things in common. We both returned to Saskatchewan. I was a reluctant teenager here. My dad was in the Air Force, but we did move back to Saskatchewan, where my father learned how to farm under the tutelage of my mother and my grandparents. And then I left at 18, and I moved to Vancouver. But I came back. Like Luca, only it took me longer. I came back at age 50 to write. So where I live now, we're not farming, but Dave and I both are writers. So we have that in common, and Luca, my protagonist, and I also have in common being of Hutterite descent, which means we're related to half the people in Langham and Dalmeny and, the area, Borden. Being of Hutterite descent, I'm sure that many of you, probably all of you, are familiar with who the Hutterites are and how they arrived in Canada. But it was a sect, an Anabaptist sect, founded in the 1500s, based on adult baptism and pacifism and their unwillingness to swear allegiance to a king. As a result, they were persecuted, particularly for being pacifists, and moved from country to country throughout mostly Central Europe, but always living in colonies. Communal life was a big part of the Hutterite belief. And in the 1870s, 60s, and 70s, on half a dozen ships, about 1,200 or so adults and children, all Hutterites, came across the ocean, came to North America, and came through the States, mostly landing at Ellis Island, and ended up in the Dakotas. And in the early 1900s, some of them moved north across the border, and contrary to communal lifestyles that were practiced everywhere else, they became individual landowners and did not live communally, but all bought farms, and were known as the Prairie Light or the Prairie Folk. So that's what we have around here. There are no communal settings immediately in this area, but it is the touchdown place for where the Hutterites first landed in the province. So I thought, all right, there's not a lot of fiction that involves Hutterites. There's a couple good books, mostly about food, and some good history books that have been produced by my family and neighbors in and around the Langham area. So the fact of Hutterite descent does have a role in this novel. So if you're my cousin, come up and say, hi, cuz. All right, so I've chosen a couple segments to read to you tonight from Danceland. You're going to meet Luca, this young woman who has returned, and you're going to meet her grandmother, which is one of the reasons that Luca has chosen to return. Luca is 30, her son is 6, her grandmother's 92. And Granny, whom she calls Ankie, her given name is Charlotte. Charlotte's 92, and Luca and her sister are both aware that she's not likely to live too many more years. So Luca has moved back to live with her grandmother in her final time, and living on a farm that happens to be located more or less where I live. So this is situated, a large part of this novel is situated in land that you would recognize, right? And with farmers and people that you would recognize too, mostly. The other character, Ankie, or grandmother, I'm going to read an excerpt from 1943 when she was about 25. And it's from her diary, which is the diary of the title. And it sets, finding that diary, Luca finds that diary after her grandmother dies. This isn't giving away any major plot points, so I'm happy to tell you, she and her sister do find the diary and they read it. And it is a major trigger in changes in Luca's life. So I'm going to read to you. One second while I just find the page, please. Luca has arrived. She's been on the farm. It's high summer, August. She arrived a day or so ago, and her son is safely ensconced on the farm and is going, okay, I think I like it here. Their cat has safely made the transition from Vancouver, which is where she moved from, which is where I also lived for years. So I do have a good knowledge of the downtown east side, which is a tough district. So this first excerpt is from chapter 1 and then a little bit from chapter 2. And after that, we'll move deeper into the novel to, I think, about chapter 17, which will be one of the very earliest excerpts from the grandmother's diary. So from chapter 1. Ankie waves yesterday's star phoenix at me after breakfast. I tell her I've already read Connie's column. Connie is her older sister. A mostly well-mannered, for Con, rant about the irrelevance of the newly announced Governor General and the Crown in general. But Ankie directs me past Con's headshot photo to an ad for an old-style threshing bee she wants to attend. It's harvest time. On that long drive back across the prairie, just Jordan and me and our cat Ming, I pointed out the big Martian monsters that modern tractors and combines have become, preying on quarter section after quarter section. Soon there will be no heavy horses, Ankie says, no threshing machines, even in museums. The boy should see one in action. You too. These are horses like my mother bred, Ankie says. She's sticking to her guns, just like always, that jutting jaw and tight lips almost quivering with indignation. So we go. Ankie says jump, we hop to it. After lunch, I pry open the passenger door of her rusty Oldsmobile. She shakes off my hand when I try to help her in, but she doesn't complain when I toss her cane into the back seat beside Jordan. Ankie doesn't drive anymore. She's what age now, 91, 92? Con and Neil, when their marriage is on track, live in town, in Saskatoon. Ankie has lived alone since I left. She has the help of a neighbor, Con said, when she called to ask me to come stay a while, maybe a few months, to keep Ankie company and help her before she dies. It sounds morbid when you put it that way, but Con's blunt. And she's been pushed to the limit, driving out to the farm to see Ankie every few days. So I sublet my apartment. Ankie and Jordan and I head north, up the gravel road towards the small town of Goodfair. Excuse me. Then west along the Yellowhead Highway. It follows the Saskatchewan, the river set in a deep, wide scrape made by the glaciers, water far below the lip of the escarpment. Good Fare, which of course doesn't exist, so you can choose any of the local towns you like. Good Fare, 25 miles west of the city of Saskatoon along the riverbank, is a straight-line prairie town. Main Street meets the railroad tracks where the co-op elevators tower over a hotel with a bar and pool tables on the main floor. Anki has told me that back in the day, the town had a store that was stocked with what the area's Mennonite and Hutterite women didn't make themselves or grow in their gardens. Rolls of yard goods, stout thread, bone buttons, needles and pins for making their family's clothing, glass quart jars for canning. Look, Jordan, I say, see those buildings by the grain elevator? I wave my arms towards the town, perched on the riverbank. That's Good Fare. You'll go to school there, kiddo, like I did, just for a while. I don't tell them that I hated it. Busted west as soon as I graduated, but I didn't have my mother. Con had left for university in Saskatoon by then, so it was just Anki and me. And Anki was a sharp-tongued woman back then. Connie and Luca's mother left when Connie was 8. She abandoned them, so she didn't have her mother. Jordan doesn't answer. On our drive to Saskatchewan, he talked my ear off, asking questions, a shrill stream that betrayed his nerves about this monumental change. But this afternoon, that familiar, shy dragonfly lands on his head. He'll talk when he's ready, just like Anki. And then it moves directly into chapter 2. I spot Mother a couple of minutes after we drive onto the farm where the threshing bee is underway. The yard is crowded, dusty, an impromptu parking lot. My grandmother's rackety battle cruiser edges forward slowly, hemmed in by dirt-caked grain trucks and dusty SUVs jammed up as densely as any urban parkade. I ease the olds parallel to a barbed wire fence, aiming for a break in the Caragana hedge. One spot left. We nose in, and as I shift the gear shift into park, my amber bracelet rattling on my wrist, Mother emerges from between a pair of poplar trees. No, it can't be. Mother left years ago. A drumbeat of adrenaline abruptly kickstarts against my ribcage. Jordan's spidey senses kick in too. What is it, Mama? Nothing, Sprout. It's okay, I say. The woman pauses between the trees at the fence line, her back turned. I lower my voice, addressing my grandmother in the passenger seat beside me. Over there, Anki. See her? Is it Mother? Can't be now, can it, Luca? Anki's calloused hand on my arm is heavy and reassuring, but I pull away and heave the car door open, squirm through the narrow clearance, shy away from the barbs waiting to snag me. The woman doesn't budge or bat an eye as I march up to her. She resembles Mother, but only as a spaniel shares general canine attributes with a collie. My heart still kicks at my ribcage. A fine, fair-boned face. A fair, fine-boned face. Oh, these words are jumping out of order on me. A fair, fine-boned face. A tall, lean physique. Same tight jeans and high-heeled boots. Same flyaway hair, exactly the same shade as Jordan's, coiled in an out-of-date honeycomb chignon, a style Mother loved. But she's definitely not Mother. What a fool I am. All these years gone by without her, how can I still feel hopeful? I retreat, muttering an apology to the stranger with the time-worn look and the brown eyes that should have been hazel. Mother always claimed that the past was dead. That claim drums through my head as I make my way back to the car. Well, BS to that. Calling the past dead is a lame hobby horse, in my opinion. A poor excuse for burying bad behavior and bad times. Mother wanted to cut free from the past. Sure, I get that. I've done my share of bitching. Like coming home to Saskatchewan with Jordan. even though I'm just staying with Ankie until she kicks her clogs. Leaving Vancouver was first-class ditching, but I was afraid to live there any longer, and I'm relieved to be gone. My friend Sherry's still there, and she's frightened, living in a city where a human predator roamed without detection for years. The thing is that Ankie needs me here. She needs Jordan, too, and to have a youngster on the place again after decades without. Jordan has helped Ankie out of the olds and is handing her the cane when I get back to them. I scrabble Ankie's chair from the trunk and shove it and a blanket under one arm. Jordan grabs my free arm. Is that the thresher? Is it like eating a cookie and having all the crumbs collect in your pajama bottoms? He asks, pointing downwind, scrambling the description I gave him on our trip across the flatland to Ankie's farm, of grain being shaken free from the stalks. No, but I keep my laugh private, glad to have something in the moment to concentrate on. No, it's like shaking all the crumbs onto the ground. I don't think I'll like this, Jordan says. Ankie, did you see that machine work when you were 6? Was it scary? Nothing to be afraid of, Liebling, Ankie says as she halts in the shade beneath a trio of elm trees. The chair unfolds like an octopus. I steady the metal arms while Ankie settles herself on the blanket-covered canvas seat. A couple of minutes pass while Jordan and I debate whether we need another blanket. He finally concedes that no, he can't see any ants. So we've just sat down cross-legged on the grass beside Ankie when another ghost makes an appearance. So I'm going to leave chapter 2 there, and you know what the thing is, right? If you want to find out what ghost, what appearance, who it is, you got to buy the book. Or get it from the library, but hey. All right, so I'm going to leap forward to chapter 17. And what's happened here is that, as I told you, Connie and Luca found their grandmother's diary. But to know how and where that happened, you know now that she died and they found her diaries, but you don't know where or how, so I'm going to leave that to you to discover on your own. Chapter 17 then is written, it's the diary excerpts with little bits of snippets from Luca popping up like a whack-a-mole, right? To fill in the blanks to the reader. So this is in Ankie's voice, and it's, she's kind of gruff, so the language is very terse. 21 March 1943, which was a tough time. Totally different from now. Marina, who was Ankie's godmother, a Ukrainian woman, who had lived on the adjoining quarter until her brothers and father were sent to the internment camps. Okay, so Marina is her godmother. Marina was cranky when I got home from work. She shouted from the kitchen that I wasn't 7 anymore. Why was I dawdling before supper? Marina was a rock. What could have bejiggered her so? Her tone changed to a croak from somewhere deep inside. She said Ma had called. Ma being Ankie's mother. Okay. But how? Ma didn't have a phone. I hurried into the kitchen. Marina set down her pot holders. She told me Ma was at the funeral parlor in Goodfair. My grandpa had died. She said sharp-like that she'd borrowed a neighbor's car. Ma had asked that I come. No sign of Gerard. At which point we hear Luca stick in this little comment. Marina's husband Gerard was a Canadian Corps veteran who lost an arm at the Somme in World War I. Post-war, he became a professor of engineering at the university. And then back to the diary entry, okay? Ankie's voice. Marina wanted to fuss over me. I told her not to. She said Grandpa died working. Lots of men want that kind of end, she said. She said she expected me to eat, but I couldn't. She told me to wrap a slice of cake for Ma. Then she grumbled about driving in the dark, that snow was coming. Well, I wanted to go tomorrow, I said, but Marina just frowned. So I grabbed my notebook. My stomach in upheaval. Grandpap in a coffin. I told her I've never seen a dead person before. That stopped her. We all die, she said. Grandpop and Ma had nursed a grudge between them. I've never seen them talk to each other. Ma is not the huggy kind. Not chatty either. She knows the breeding cycles of mares, the moods of stallions. Not my mood swings, not anyone's. She never spoke of my father, who was also named Jordan, either. I can't think of him as my father, just a disembodied man. He vanished before I was born. We're still in the diary here. He vanished before I was born. Ma claims she last saw him saddling up to ride over to the Shevchenko quarter. That was Marina's family. Checking that the well was covered for winter. No one saw that gelding again. The homestead where Marina grew up, abandoned now, left empty ever since Marina's father and brothers were shipped to the internment camp in the mountains. Ma says she and Jordan had hoped to buy that quarter to get out under Grandpap. But then Jordan vanished. That's all I know about him. Right after that, Ma broke free. Started taking that stallion, Marco, to horse shows, winning and wearing men's clothing. I used to draw a face that I thought was his, my father's, day after day, over and over in my sketchbook. Told myself, I don't miss him. He never existed for me. But Grandpap took care of me while Ma took that stallion on the livestock breeding train across the province. Him and Uncle Albert, the closest I came to having a father. Ma wasn't much of a mother either. She chose her horses over me. I've been paying my own rent at Marina's ever since I got that job at Chanley's Cafe. I'm not ready to think about dying. Anybody dying. Especially not Grandpap dying. Would Ma mourn my death? Same way she'd mourned her stillborn fillies and colts? Like she cried for her herd when sleeping sickness wiped them out? I had felt her grief from my bedroom in Saskatoon. Grandpap wasn't much for laughing. When he did, I cut both ways. The year before I moved to town to live with Marina, I showed him my latest sewing project. A drop-waisted, sleeveless dress of royal blue. Grandpap took one look and snickered. Asked if I was fixing to wear it as a nightgown. I never forgot. Donnerwetter, Grandpap's old curse word. And then we hear from Luca briefly. I needed that Hutterish dictionary after all. I learned that thunder weather is the literal translation for Donnerwetter. Great curse word, full of resonance and noise, just like thunder. So then back into the diary with Anki. She's still in the car. No stars, just heavy clouds. I rolled down the window, leaned out. Cold air snapped my skin. Donnerwetter, Fahrfluch, zum Teufel, verdammt. I pulled my head back in, ears and forehead stinging. Asked Marina if Grandpap liked horses as much as Ma had. Marina didn't think so, said Ma was always horse crazy. Horses were work animals to Grandpap. She told me that he threatened to take a horsewhip to Ma when he caught her in the paddock as a little girl. She laughed at him, but he did whip her a few times. Marina said he threatened to take his whip to her too, but she just ran off home. I wanted to know what he was like to other people. He was a black man in his heart. Marina tried to smile as she said it. But he was always kind to me. And then I remembered the blue dress. Donnerwetter. All of Grandpap's rules. Dogs and cats and horses, all working animals. I never saw a single pet on the farm. Marina said Grandpap lived through hard times. Any animal had to earn its keep. She asked if Ma ever told me about Peanut. Then she added, no, never mind.
So I asked her. She told me Peanut was a puppy Jordan gave Ma as a wedding present. She told me Grandpa kicked it when it got underfoot and cursed it. Goy zum Teufel. The poor dog never got up. I put my head back out the window into the anesthetic cold, a necessity against the ache taking over my innards. A dead puppy. How had Mom mourned that loss? I waited for more snow to fall, waited for my father, always absent. When I asked Marina about him, she didn't hear. What are we doing for time? Shall I carry on? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now the question is, do you want me to carry on reading in that timeline, the diary timeline? Mm-hmm. Yes, because that's a diary after all, right? All right. All right, so I'm going to skip this part. We go into the funeral parlor where her grandfather is displayed in his coffin in the traditional style, but his face is bruised. And they want to know what happened, and he had fallen apparently just before he died, taken a bad fall. And her mother is the only person in the room other than the dead man in the coffin. So it was a difficult thing, her first encounter with a dead body. So we left. Marina didn't want to ride. She called Marina's offer foolishness. Ma didn't want to ride, sorry. Left us standing beside the coffin. I felt wings spreading beneath my shoulder blades, carrying me into the clouds. Ma coaxing unwilling fillies on a lead line. Grandpap in his workshop, hammer clenched in his right hand, head back and shouting. The air vibrating. Grandpap's funeral, one of the worst events of my life. Now, I know there is one small country church over not far from where we live, where my family is all buried. I don't know if there are any more in the neighborhood, but so if you are familiar with Langham in that little country church, okay, think of that. That's the place I was thinking of. Okay. The little church close to the farm, its casket open. I sat between Ma and Marina, trapped like a fly, nowhere to escape to. Uncle Albert wore a suit. I didn't know he even owned a suit. Every seat filled. I hadn't thought Grandpop would draw a crowd. Maybe a show of respect for an immigrant? For a man who'd made his own life by building homes in his community? And the hymns. The minister from a colony somewhere in Alberta. Ma said it was lucky the minister's eulogy wasn't all in High German. Hypocrisy to have such a funeral, I told her. Ma said that's what Grandpap had asked for before he died out of the blue. Made me wonder, hearing that. Sure, he was a Hutterite. We all are. But he never mentioned God, not to me. Not even when we'd ridden to church in Ma's carriage. Who was the church service really for? Out to the graveyard. I left my gloves behind. Donnerwetter. Avoided looking at the hole. The wind in the trees, exactly how I felt. Ma nodded. Did she feel it too? She turned away as the shovels were passed from hand to hand. So then there's a scene at the lunch where everyone greets Charlotte and says, "Oh, you must be Charlotte, all grown up," and practically pats her, even though she's a 25-year-old woman, right? But they were all glad to see her. You know, they were all related. But then someone at a table just behind where Charlotte was sitting whispered something. A woman's voice I didn't recognize, calling my father Jordan bad names. A wild one, der Leutscher, eine Feigerhund. Then he added that maybe he joined the Yank army after all. Who knew how deep "thou shalt not kill" actually ran in him? She said her money was on my grandpap. Put that youngster down a well, was her guess. Where else do you hide a body out in the dry land? So then there's a scene amongst the family I'm going to skip ahead into the next month, chapter 19, April 1943, where Charlotte, who works in Chanley's cafe as a waitress, meets a woman who's going to have a great impact on her life. So, 19 April 1943. At lunch, I was pouring postum for Vic when the doorbell chimed. A woman came into the cafe. Her clothes, a snazzy red pillbox hat and red wool overcoat, red hair loose beneath the hat, cat's pointy face. She took the only open stool, beside Vic's favorite spot at the end of the counter. Vic stared. His hook knocked his mug right off the counter. His face turned red with beets. She just unbelted her coat. A fitted suit, too, red. Then she tossed her hair, crossed her legs, taut calves, fur-trimmed boots. I laughed, set a fresh cup for Vic. He was an old guy, lost his left hand in the Boer War, a widower for at least 10 years. But men never lose interest. I waved the pot in the woman's direction and set it down when she shook her head. I told her the lunch special. Brushed at my uniform, crumbs, stains on my apron. She asked for salad. Her voice, a little girl's. Like Shirley Temple? No, not bubbly enough. Judy Garland? Liz Taylor? But that thick accent. Irish, I think. Same eyes as Taylor's, deep blue, almost violet. Hair like spun copper. A stunner, but a tough stunner. When she caught Vic staring, she let fly. Told him to stop gawking. Called him an old fella. Vic went brighter red and turned his back. I told her there were no greens this week. Asked if she wanted coleslaw with the pork chop. She just wanted the mash and coleslaw, vegetables. No meat, no gravy. Lit her cigarette, said, deadly, when I brought her plate. I never heard anyone talk like that before. And then a 50-cent tip under her plate. She promenaded down the aisle and Vic dropped his mug. He muttered a curse in Serbian and the woman turned and caught me looking. I pocketed the tip and felt really uncomfortable. What kind of woman dresses in red, top to toes? Some dish. But something else caught me. That woman acted like she was someone worth knowing. Someone valuable. Not a sense I have. Wish I did. A couple days later, 20th of April, 1943. That woman came back this morning, early. No one else about. I couldn't help gawking. Felt a fool to think my new coat was fashionable. It can't hold a candle to dolman sleeves with caped shoulders and black with scarlet wool. A long swing that fell below her knees. She threw that coat across an empty stool like it was nothing. Sat down and spun around. A yellow wool dress, a fabric ruffle over her breast, clinging. Skirt flipped over her knees as she spun like a kid, round and round and round and round and round. She apologized about yesterday, smiled so wide I could count each tooth. Her teeth not as immaculate as the rest of her, stained, chipped. She said she didn't mean to be a holy, Joe. Didn't mean to cause a ruckus. You have to imagine the Irish accent. I can't do it, but that's okay. I told her Vic just didn't know what to make of her outfit. That old fella's always did that. Then she asked what was fiercely good to eat. Pointed towards the shelf. All it held was half a cake and a plate full of scones. Asked if any of that baked stuff was worth a deco. I had no idea what she meant. A look, she said. Any of it worth a look. I told her the victory cake was pretty good toasted, that the scones were nice too, but no butter, right? So they didn't quite taste like scones were supposed to taste. She told me to crack on, called me doll. Asked if the eggs were powdered. Of course, I said. Then she said she'd be so glad when this war was over. Desperate it was. Ordered eggs, scrambled. The only way to eat those powdered eggs. Toasted victory cake, but no postum. Said she hated the taste of molasses. Asked if we had any coffee. made a face when I said, "No, of course not. No one has coffee, gamour." "Herb tea then," she said. I told her Ma calls it Kreiter tea. That those words made me think of rocks, not something worth drinking. Don't know why I said that. She asked what language, and I told her Hutterish, kind of like Yiddish. Then I remembered my job. Told her she could hang the coat on the hook by the door. Well, she was no 20-year-old like I first thought. 30, maybe 35. Tiny crow's feet at the outer corners of her eyes. Wrinkles downward from her nose. But her hands had me wondering. Smooth nails buffed to a sheen I've never bothered to work on. Money and time. That's what made nails like that. Seemed like she had plenty of each. Chanley's bell rang and I set her plate on the counter. She called me doll again. I said, "Thanks, bleeding deadly." The bell over the door chimed. Uh-oh. Vic. He veered like a rabbit running for cover, took a table at the far end of the cafe, his back turned. Well, breakfast kept me jumping, but each trip down the counter aisle I wondered, what work paid that well? She had no rings, so she was unmarried. Maybe she'd been born into money. Maybe her sweetheart taught at the flying school. Maybe she designed fashions in Toronto or New York. She dressed well enough, and I pictured snazzy dresses and fancy hats. Then the daydream burst when she stopped me, one hand on my forearm. I jumped a foot and hot tea slopped from the mug I held. Over my wrist, onto her cuff. She winced. Oh, Chanley was going to kill me. Donner. But she apologized. Called her dress an old rag. Said she'd had it for donkey's years. Nothing to worry about. 10 minutes later, she waved me over. Introduced herself as Tessa. Read my name tag. "Charlotte? Too fancy a name," she said, and laughed. Said she'd call me Lottie. All right, well, I'm going to leave it there because I hope you have questions. Yeah, well, that's the thing. You want to leave people and say, all right, well, look how much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.